At the kitchen table, they handed my sister $10,000 for her future home while I got a bill for the family phone plan. I wasn't even living there. They didn't expect me to ask one question that made my mom drop her glass. I'm 32 female, and honestly, I've been carrying this for months now. I haven't told most of my friends. I didn't tell my therapist until 2 sessions ago. And every time I replay it, it still feels unreal. I grew up in Pittsburgh, in a quiet residential part of Greenfield. Nothing glamorous. Just that small town in a city feel. Sloping driveways, crabapple trees, and neighbors who bring over casseroles after surgeries. My parents, Martin and Rosalie, were like any other middle-class couple of their generation, practical, strict, and deeply invested in how things looked from the outside. Dad worked as a mechanical engineer for U.S. Steel. He left early, came home late, and lived for his lawn. My mom, a former nurse, was one of those women who thought being right was a personality. She left her job to stay home with us when we were young. Us means me and my younger sister, Talia. Talia is 2 years younger, but you wouldn't know it the way our parents treated her. Ever since she was a toddler, it was like the universe was just slightly more aligned in her favor. She had that golden child glow. Big blue eyes, sun-kissed curls, and a laugh like she was born with a wind chime in her throat. Me? I was a quiet, lanky kid who liked books more than people and always had at least one skinned knee. I wore thick glasses from age 7 and never really grew out of the awkward phase. It's funny. You think it'll all even out when you grow up. But it doesn't. When I was 18, I left home for college in Chicago. That distance, at the time, felt like liberation. I'd worked hard, earned scholarships, and had every intention of building a life far from my parents' house and its selective warmth. Meanwhile, Talia stayed. She went to community college but didn't finish. Worked a few jobs, dated a string of guys who ranged from forgettable to borderline disastrous, and moved back home at least 3 separate times. My parents always welcomed her with open arms and excuses. She's figuring things out. The world's so hard now. Not everyone has to follow the same path. They never said those things when I struggled. When my ex-husband cheated on me and left me with 2 months' rent due, my mother's only response was, "You always were too career-focused." But again, I let it go. I told myself families are complicated. You don't always get the validation you want. That's life. Which brings us to this past March. I was living in Philly at the time, still am. I'm a freelance editor, mostly working with independent authors and small publishers. It's not glamorous, but it's honest work, and I'm good at it. I was finally getting to a place financially where I didn't feel like I was holding my breath every time rent was due. My mom called on a Wednesday to invite me to dinner that weekend. "Just us," she said. "We have something to share." I almost didn't go. It's a 4.5-hour drive, and my weekends are sacred. But something in her voice, something upbeat and a little too cheerful, made me curious. When I arrived on Sunday afternoon, I found the table already set, candles lit, the smell of pot roast in the air. It was almost performative. Talia was there, of course, freshly curled hair, a little too much bronzer, sitting cross-legged on the dining room chair like she belonged on a magazine cover. Dinner was fine. Stiff, but fine. Then, over dessert, my mom's cherry pie, they dropped it. "We wanted to do something special," my dad said. "For Talia," my mom added, with a glowing smile. My dad reached into the sideboard drawer and pulled out a white envelope. He handed it to Talia, who opened it with this well-practiced little gasp. "Oh my God. Oh my God." Inside, $10,000 in cash. "For a down payment," my mom said. "Or closing costs. Whatever she needs for her future home." They were so proud of themselves. I just sat there. I didn't know how to react. I hadn't been offered anything. No acknowledgement. Not even a "we wanted to include you too." And then my dad turned to me, as if remembering I existed. "We were also hoping you could take care of this." He slid an envelope across the table to me. I opened it. A printed bill. 3 months of the family phone plan. A line that I hadn't used since moving out over 4 years ago. I stared at it. $318.42. "Wait," I said slowly, "you're giving Talia 10 grand, and I get the phone bill?" My mom tilted her head. "You're doing so well for yourself, sweetie. You don't need help." That's when I asked the question. Simple. Direct. Where did the money come from? My mom blinked. What? 10,000, I said. You've said money's tight. Did you refinance? Or, did it come from Grandma Lucille's trust? I didn't even raise my voice. But the silence that followed was the loudest thing in the room. My mother's face went pale. Then she dropped her wine glass. It hit the floor, exploded into pieces, and the red liquid spread across the tile like blood. My dad looked at her. She looked at him. No one spoke. That was when I knew. They'd taken it. I didn't say anything for what felt like a long time. I could hear the soft ticking of the old kitchen clock and the distant hum of the dishwasher. Talia was still holding the envelope in her hands, her face frozen somewhere between confusion and panic. I don't know if she realized the weight of what had just been asked, or if she just didn't want to know. My mom crouched down to clean the broken glass without a word. My dad picked up a dish towel and dropped it into the red puddle, blotting at the floor like he was trying to erase the question itself. I don't understand why you're so upset, he finally said, not looking at me. You've always done fine on your own. I pushed the bill across the table toward him. You asked me to pay for something I haven't used in 4 years, and you gave Talia money from my grandmother's trust. It wasn't like that, my mom snapped suddenly. It was just easier this way. You're not around. We didn't think it mattered. My voice cracked when I asked, you didn't think I'd care if you gave away my half? We weren't giving it away, she said quickly, still down on her knees with the glass. She's going to use it for a home. An investment. We thought it would benefit the family. She is the family, I said, standing up. So am I. Or am I only family when it's convenient for you? Talia finally spoke. Quiet, hesitant. I didn't know it was from Grandma Lucille. I looked at her. I really looked at her. And at that moment, I couldn't tell if she was lying or just didn't want to believe the truth. That was the thing about Talia. She was never malicious. Just willfully, blissfully unaware of anything that didn't serve her version of the world. If she hadn't known, it was because she'd made it a point not to ask. My mom stood, brushing her hands off on a napkin, her face now tight with frustration. Why are you turning this into a courtroom, Delia? This was supposed to be a nice evening. A family gesture. I laughed. Actually, I laughed. You handed me a bill and expected gratitude. Don't be dramatic, she hissed, but the damage was done. I grabbed my coat and bag. I'm leaving. Delia, my dad started, don't do this. Don't blow things out of proportion. No, I said, opening the front door. You already did that. I didn't sleep that night. I drove back to Philly in silence. No music. No podcasts. Just the low hum of the highway and the realization that my parents had stolen from me. And that they hadn't even thought it would matter. By the time I got home, my phone had 3 missed calls and 2 texts from Talia. I didn't know. Please believe me. Can we talk? I didn't respond. The next morning, I called my grandmother's old estate attorney. He'd been based out of Mount Lebanon, and I still had his card from when we met 2 years ago after Lucille passed. I remember she'd kept things tidy, organized down to the penny. No drama. No big secrets. He remembered me immediately. When I asked if the trust had been closed out, he said yes, it had been released to the family with a signed acknowledgement from both parents that they'd distribute it equally to me and Talia, per Lucille's will. I asked for a copy of that document. He emailed it within the hour. It was there, in plain language. To be divided in equal measure and with full transparency to the 2 named granddaughters, Delia, redacted, and Talia, redacted. Equal measure. Full transparency. Nothing about letting the parents distribute however they saw fit. Nothing about, well, she's doing better, clauses. I sat there staring at that PDF file on my screen for nearly 30 minutes. It wasn't just about the money. It was about a lie. The assumption that I wouldn't ask. That I'd just accept being treated like a guest in my own family. My stomach churned. I didn't want to sue my parents. I didn't want to turn this into a legal war. But I also couldn't walk away. So, I called a friend of mine from college, Paula, who was now a practicing family and estate attorney in Philadelphia. We hadn't talked much in years, but when I explained what was going on, she said flatly, "You have grounds." She offered to write a formal letter. Not a lawsuit, yet. Just an inquiry, with a polite but pointed tone, referencing the will, the terms, and the expectation of an equal disbursement. It was sent certified mail 2 days later. That's when things really started unraveling. My mom called first. I didn't answer. The voicemail was venom wrapped in sugar. "I just can't believe you'd go this far over something so silly. Talia needs that help. You have your own life. You've always been the strong one." That phrase again. The strong one. Their favorite excuse for neglect. Then came an email. A long, rambling defense of their actions. My dad co-signed it with one terse line at the end: "We did what we thought was best." I forwarded it to Paula. She advised me to say nothing and let her handle it. They got a lawyer. Things got formal. I learned that the trust had been cashed out 8 months earlier, something they never told me, and placed in their joint savings account. From there, the money had been divided. A portion used for home repairs. Another to help Talia transition. My name never came up in their planning. They were stunned I'd involved a lawyer. Offended. Insulted. But legally? They were cornered. And Talia? She stopped calling. Stopped texting. The silence from Talia hurt more than I expected. For a while, I checked my phone obsessively. Not because I wanted her to grovel or beg, but because some small, pathetic part of me hoped she'd acknowledge it, just once. That what they did was wrong. That I mattered. But weeks passed. Nothing. Not even a reaction to the legal letter. She blocked me on Instagram, which felt like a slap for reasons I couldn't articulate. And then mutual friends started messaging, asking, "What's going on with your family? Your sister posted something about betrayal," so I checked. She hadn't blocked my burner account. It was all vague quotes, long captions about trust being broken and choosing peace, and one post with a photo of her in front of a realtor sold sign, captioned, "Manifesting abundance." Abundance funded with my inheritance. I didn't even have it in me to feel rage at that point. It was like hitting emotional saturation. You don't boil over. You just go still. Meanwhile, my parents were going full Cold War mode, everything through their attorney, no direct contact. Paula handled it like a champ. Professional, courteous, but firm. She made it clear, I wasn't backing down. Not out of pettiness, but because they crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. We weren't just talking about trust. We were talking about the erasure of personhood. I wasn't just not included, I was excluded with intention. They had decided I didn't need it. Like a judgment had been made on my worth without my input. It all culminated in a proposed settlement. My parents would pay out $12,000 to me in 3 installments over the next 6 months. That was my half, minus the amount they could prove had gone toward joint family expenses, which, frankly, was just a way to soften the blow. I accepted. It wasn't worth the court battle. It wasn't worth dragging my grandmother's name through legal sludge for another 6 months. But the paper trail was created. The agreement was signed. And they had to acknowledge, on the record, that I had been entitled to the full half all along. There was no apology. Not verbally. Not in writing. Not even implied. Just money. And distance. That summer, I didn't visit once. No 4th of July barbecue. No quick weekend drive for coffee with my dad or my mom's weird little antique mall outings. Birthdays came and went. I got a generic e-card from my mom with no message, just a click to view your greeting, animation of balloons popping over a cartoon cake. The kind of thing you'd send a dentist's receptionist. Talia's birthday was in August. My parents posted a long Facebook tribute, complete with childhood photos and paragraphs about how proud they were of her new home, her strength, her beautiful future. She posted pictures of her housewarming. My parents were front and center in most of them. My old room's furniture was visible in one corner of a picture, my childhood dresser, repainted white. No mention of me. Not one. I realized something strange then. Not painful, not even surprising, just clarifying. They were willing to let me disappear. Not because they hated me. But because I no longer fit the script. I wasn't the daughter who called crying about car trouble or asked for money or came home for comfort. I had built my life outside of them. And once they decided I was fine, I became a utility. The strong one who didn't need, therefore didn't deserve. I became an extra in my own family's play. Around that time, I'd bumped into someone from high school, Jessie, at a bookstore near Rittenhouse Square. We'd never been close, but she always had a sharp memory and a sharper tongue. We caught up for a bit, and she asked, casually, "You still close with your folks?" I hesitated. "Not really." She shrugged. "Didn't think so." Everyone knew they favored Talia. It was so blunt I nearly laughed. "You knew?" "God, everyone knew," she said. "I remember in sophomore year when your mom showed up to the school play and left before your scene. Someone said she had to pick up Talia from ballet. Like, okay? But you were on stage." I think that was the moment it all collapsed inside of me. Not because of what Jessie said, but because I couldn't even remember the play. I couldn't remember what I performed. It was like that whole chunk of memory had been deleted. What else had I erased? After that, I began writing things down. Not out of bitterness, but survival. All the moments I'd brushed off. The conversations where I'd been too sensitive. The birthdays where Talia's gifts were wrapped with bows while mine were handed to me in the Target bag. The way my achievements were met with polite claps, while hers were shouted from rooftops. It became a kind of inventory of erasure. It wasn't abuse. It wasn't neglect. But it was a form of emotional malnourishment. And I had been starving for years without even realizing it. Eventually, I took down the family photos from my apartment wall. Not in anger. Just clarity. I didn't need daily reminders of people who had already chosen to forget me. The strangest part was how quiet life became after it all settled. Not peaceful, just quiet. There's a kind of silence that seeps into your bones when you stop chasing something you didn't know you were chasing. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't trying to earn anyone's approval. Not my parents', not Talia's. I wasn't shaping myself around their expectations, or interpreting every phone call and comment like a line of code I had to decrypt. I'd stopped performing. But that didn't mean I wasn't hurting. The grief was real. Messy. Private. It came in small, stupid waves. I'd reach for my phone on Sunday mornings to send my mom a picture of the farmer's market flowers like I used to, and then remember there was no one on the other end anymore. I'd walk past a shop window and think, Talia would love that, then feel my stomach twist. You don't mourn what's gone. You mourn the things that should have been there and never were. My therapist, Margaret, helped me put language to it. It's disenfranchised grief, she said. You're grieving something no one else saw you lose. That stuck with me. I didn't tell most people what happened. Not because I was ashamed, but because I couldn't stand the faces they made when I explained it. That mix of pity and disbelief. People want families to be fixable. They say things like, but they're your parents, or she's still your sister. As if blood absolves betrayal. The only people who really understood were those who'd lived it. In an odd twist, my little support circle shifted. Friends who came from spotless Hallmark families quietly drifted away from the topic, while others, colleagues, old acquaintances, even a neighbor down the hall, opened up about their own fractures. Estrangements. Inherited resentment. Unseen wounds. I stopped feeling so uniquely broken. Around that time, Talia reappeared. It was subtle at first. She unblocked me on Instagram. Then, a few weeks later, she sent a message. Hey. I know things have been weird. I just wanted to say I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I wish it had gone differently. Hope you're okay. I stared at it for a full hour before responding. I didn't know what to say. Every part of me wanted to unload. To ask how she could just take the money. How she could go along with it. How she could say nothing when they handed me a goddamn phone bill like I was the family accountant instead of their daughter. But I didn't. Instead, I replied, appreciate the message. I'm doing okay. Hope you are too. That was it. She hearted the message. No follow-up. Part of me hoped she'd try again. Ask to meet. Say she understood. That she knew it wasn't fair. That she was sorry, not for the money, but for being silent. But silence is her comfort zone. It always has been. Fall rolled in. That first cold snap in October hit like a switch. I found myself walking more. Taking long, wandering routes around the city after work, bundled up in layers and podcasts. Not even listening half the time, just needing noise. One night, I passed a cozy Italian place I hadn't noticed before. Dim lights, tiny tables, that warm buzz of silverware and soft laughter. And suddenly, out of nowhere, I thought, if I had a daughter, I'd bring her here. The thought gutted me. Not because I want kids, still unsure. But because I couldn't remember the last time I had a warm memory of my mother that didn't come with a caveat. Even our good moments were conditional. If I laughed too loud, I was embarrassed. If I wore something she didn't like, she'd comment. If I had good news, it was followed by a question about Talia. Even when I was doing well, I was just a placeholder. Someone they could brag about while quietly investing everything, emotionally, financially, spiritually, into their favorite. Realizing that was like swallowing gravel. But I kept walking. That's all you can do sometimes. Keep walking. Even if the path feels unfamiliar. Around Thanksgiving, I got an invitation to a family friendsgiving at a mutual friend's house in Shadyside. I hadn't planned to go back to Pittsburgh again that year, but something about the invite felt safe. Neutral ground. No drama. Just friends and food. I went. Talia was there. She was with a guy I didn't recognize. Tall, quiet, looked like he worked in tech or was trying to. She spotted me from across the kitchen and her face did that thing it always did, half smile, half please don't hate me. We didn't talk for a long time. Then, over drinks, she found her way over. We stood near the snack table, staring at a tray of mini quiches like they held the secrets of the universe. I didn't expect to see you here, she said softly. I wasn't sure I'd come. I'm glad you did. I nodded. There was a long pause. She took a breath like she was about to dive underwater. I'm sorry, Delia. For not saying anything. For letting them do what they did. I looked at her. Really looked. She looked smaller. Not physically. But less inflated. Less shiny. Her hair was in a messy bun, her makeup more muted. She looked tired. Why didn't you speak up? I asked. My voice didn't carry anger anymore. Just quiet sadness. She exhaled. Because they made it sound like it was already decided. Like it was for the best. And I was so used to being the one they took care of. I didn't want to rock the boat. She looked down at her cup. And honestly, she added, I didn't want to lose what they were giving me. There it was. The honesty I'd waited a year to hear. I didn't respond right away. We just stood there, two sisters at the edges of the same room but completely different lives. She looked nervous, but not ashamed. And that was telling. She wasn't apologizing because she suddenly realized how much I was hurt. She was apologizing because the cost of staying silent had finally caught up to her. I didn't plan my next words. They just came. You let them rob me. And you were okay with it until it made you look bad. Her face twisted like she wanted to argue, but she didn't. Maybe because it was true. And the truth, once it's out, can't be stuffed back into the box. We didn't speak again that night. After that, I didn't reach out to her. Or my parents. I focused on my life. My work. I said yes to editing projects I used to think were out of my league. I joined a writing group. I made a weekend ritual of walking to a cafe that made perfect rosemary focaccia and started actually talking to the people behind the counter. For the first time, my life felt like mine. But I didn't forget. See, I knew something my parents didn't. While they were busy counting cash and memories that excluded me, they'd missed something very important. Grandma Lucille hadn't just left behind a trust. She left behind a paper trail. Receipts. Journals. Copies of every birthday card, every check, every note she ever wrote. And in one of those journals, stored in a dusty, ignored bin in her attic, which the estate attorney had offered me before the house was cleared, I found something interesting. A draft letter. Written in Lucille's handwriting. Dated 6 months before her death. It read, if anything should happen to me, and the money I've left behind does not reach both my granddaughters equally, please know it was not my wish. I love Delia and Talia equally, but I fear Rosalie has always seen them through different eyes. Boom. It wasn't legally binding. But it was true. On paper. And I knew exactly what to do with it. By spring, I had compiled a full digital record, emails, the trust documents, the settlement letter, screenshots of the future home social media posts, the journal page, scanned, and a short essay I wrote, not bitter, not aggressive, just honest. I published it anonymously on a mid-sized personal blog that runs a column called Inheritance and Estrangement. Think, the gritty version of a modern love column. Humans. Specific. Cathartic. It went semi-viral in certain corners of the internet. Reddit picked it up. So did a small family law newsletter. I didn't name names. I didn't need to. But people who knew. They knew. I got an email from one of my high school teachers. I always knew something was off. Thank you for writing that. And then, about 3 weeks later, a mutual friend told me that Talia's shiny reputation in her neighborhood had started to tarnish. People started asking questions. About the house. About the money. About why her parents no longer spoke of both daughters. Apparently, a couple from her community group had seen the article and recognized the furniture in the background of one of the house photos. My old dresser. No one was unkind to her. No one sent hate mail. But the attention shifted. The glow dulled. It turns out when your entire adult identity is built on image and charm, having that image cracked publicly, even a little, is devastating. And my parents? Well, according to another old neighbor I still keep in touch with, they're keeping a low profile these days. Apparently they stopped hosting their usual garden party that summer. Rosalie told someone she was just not feeling very social lately. I smiled when I heard that. Not because I wanted them to suffer, but because it was the first time in my life that they had to explain themselves. I didn't burn their house down. I didn't shout. I didn't take them to court or ruin holidays. I just told the truth. And the truth, when handled right, is the most powerful revenge of all. Now? I'm still in Philly. Still working. Still editing stories for a living, except now, I've started writing my own again. Not just essays, but fiction. Stories about families, and loyalty, and how sometimes the people who are supposed to love you, just don't know how. And that's okay. Because I do. I know how to love with clarity. With integrity. With distance, when needed. And when I sit at my own kitchen table now, it's mine. Fully. Completely. No bills disguised as love. No silence pretending to be peace. Just me. And that, finally, is enough.